It seems like the writers are preparing to rip the rug right out from under Curtis just when he thinks he has finally secured his happily ever after. According to the latest unconfirmed leak, shortly after the baby is born, the doctors are going to notice some terrifying and unusual symptoms. The child will allegedly start showing signs of severe distress, prompting the medical team to rush in and perform a battery of emergency tests. What if this is not just a minor complication, but a life-threatening crisis that no one saw coming? The truth might be way more complicated than a simple newborn infection. The behind-the-scenes whispers suggest that the doctors will deliver a shocking diagnosis. The newborn is suffering from an incredibly rare and aggressive blood disease. The only way to save the fragile infant's life is a bone marrow transplant, and it has to happen immediately. The timeline is supposedly so tight that the hospital will not even have the luxury of searching the National Registry. They will have to rely strictly on immediate family members, setting the stage for a desperate race against the clock that will push every single character to their absolute emotional breaking point. It seems like Curtis is going to be the first one to step up to the plate, completely confident that he will be the hero who saves his newborn son. He is the father after all, and the hush-hush rumor is that he will not even hesitate to offer his bone marrow, practically begging the doctors to take whatever they need to save the child. High chances are the audience is going to be treated to some incredibly moving scenes of Curtis praying in the hospital chapel, making promises to the universe that he will be the best father imaginable if only his son survives. But this is where the drastic storyline shift really kicks into high gear. The unconfirmed leak reveals that the initial test results will come back, and they will leave the entire medical team stunned into silence. Curtis's bone marrow will not be a match. Not even close. What if the writers are using this medical anomaly to plant the very first seed of doubt in Curtis's mind about his own family? The truth might be way more complicated than just a stroke of bad genetic luck. Naturally, the doctors will explain that genetics can be tricky and that a father not matching his child is rare but medically possible. Portia, heavily recovering from the traumatic birth and exhausted beyond measure, will immediately demand to be tested next. It seems like she will be clinging to the desperate hope that she can be the one to provide the miracle her baby desperately needs. The behind-the-scenes whispers indicate that the tension in that hospital room will be suffocating as they wait for Portia's results to come back from the lab. High chances are the writers are going to drag this agonizing suspense out over an entire Friday cliffhanger to keep us on the edge of our seats. And when the results finally come in, the second massive shockwave will hit the family. Portia will not be a match either. The unconfirmed leaks suggest that this double failure will send the hospital staff into a panic, forcing them to widen the search to the extended family immediately. What if this widening search is exactly how the show plans to involve the rest of the canvas in this agonizing storyline? Trina will allegedly be called to the hospital, her heart breaking as she watches her mother spiral into absolute despair. The hush-hush rumor is that Trina will eagerly roll up her sleeve, praying that being a half-sibling will be enough of a genetic link to save the innocent child's life. But it seems like her tests will also come back negative, adding another layer of devastation. Then the net will be cast even wider. Stella and Marshall will be rushed to the hospital, both desperate to save their newest family member. High chances are we will see Stella breaking down in tears, offering everything she has, while Marshall tries to remain the stoic rock for Curtis. However, the truth might be way more complicated, because the unconfirmed leak states that every single family member from both sides will fail the compatibility tests. One by one, every door of hope will be brutally slammed shut. As the hours tick by, the baby's condition will rapidly deteriorate. It seems like the writers want to push Portia into a corner so dark and terrifying that she has no choice but to detonate the bomb she has been hiding for months. The doctors will allegedly issue a grim warning if they do not find a donor within the next few hours. The infant's chances of survival will drop to 0. High chances are this ticking clock is the catalyst that will finally force Portia's hand. The behind-the-scenes whispers describe a scene where Portia, completely unhinged by grief and terror, falls to her knees in the hospital corridor. What if this is the exact moment she realizes that her web of lies is about to cost her child's life? The truth might be way more complicated than a simple confession. It will be an act of sheer, unfiltered desperation. Through her hysterical tears, Portia will allegedly demand that the doctors contact Isaiah immediately. The unconfirmed leak suggests that the mention of Isaiah's name in this critical moment will send a massive chill through the hospital waiting room. It seems like Curtis will be entirely confused, his exhausted brain struggling to process why his wife is suddenly calling for a man she supposedly barely knows to save their son. High chances are Curtis will assume Portia is just grasping at straws, remembering that Isaiah is a former surgeon and hoping he might have some miraculous medical connection that can save the day. But what if Trina is the one who connects the dots first? The hush-hush rumor is that Trina will look at her mother's panicked, guilt-ridden eyes and instantly realize that something is horribly wrong with this picture. The truth might be way more complicated than anyone realizes, and Trina's growing suspicion will add an incredibly thick layer of psychological tension to the waiting game as Isaiah is urgently summoned to the hospital. According to the behind-the-scenes whispers, Isaiah will arrive at the hospital completely unaware of the massive storm he is walking into. He will allegedly assume he is being called in for a medical consult regarding the rare disease, only to be ambushed by a hysterical Portia begging him to submit a DNA and bone marrow sample. It seems like Isaiah will not even hesitate for a single second. The unconfirmed leak paints him as a man who, despite his mysterious past, will immediately agree to undergo the painful extraction process if it means saving an innocent newborn's life. Hi, chances are the audience will be on the absolute edge of their seats as the lab technicians rush Isaiah's samples through the emergency protocols. What if this is the moment Isaiah himself starts to put the pieces together? The truth might be way more complicated as he sits in the waiting room, staring at Portia's terrified face, wondering why he, out of all the people in the city, was the one she called in her darkest hour. Then comes the moment that will allegedly break the internet and shatter the canvas. The hush-hush rumor is that the lead doctor will walk out of the laboratory looking completely stunned by the data on his clipboard. It seems like the results will defy all logical medical odds for a random stranger. Isaiah's bone marrow will not just be a match. It will be a near-perfect, incredibly rare genetic match that guarantees the transplant's success. High chances are, Curtis will be so overwhelmed with relief that he will actually hug Isaiah, thanking him with tears in his eyes for being the miracle their family desperately needed. But what if that emotional hug is the ultimate tragic irony of the entire decade? The truth might be way more complicated, because while the surgical team rushes to prepare the baby for the emergency transplant, the laboratory will be quietly running one final, mandatory test. The unconfirmed leak reveals that standard hospital protocol for such a rare and perfect match requires a full genetic DNA workup to rule out any underlying hereditary conditions before the marrow is introduced to the infant's system. It seems like the writers are going to intercut the tense, life-saving surgery with the slow, agonizing printing of the genetic test results in the lab. The behind-the-scenes whispers describe a beautifully tragic sequence where Isaiah is lying on an operating table, giving a piece of his own body to save the child, while a technician unknowingly uncovers the explosive secret hidden deep within his blood. High chances are the bone marrow surgery will be a massive medical success. The baby's vitals will stabilize, and a collective sigh of immense relief will wash over Portia, Curtis, Trina, Stella, and Marshall in the waiting room. But what if that profound relief is exactly what the writers want you to feel right before they drop the nuclear bomb? The truth might be way more complicated, as the lead doctor slowly walks into the waiting room, holding a manila folder containing the genetic breakdown. The hush-hush rumor is that the doctor will ask to speak to Portia and Curtis in private, but Curtis, riding the high of his son's survival, will insist they share the good news with the whole family present. That is when the unconfirmed leak says the world will officially stop spinning for this family. The doctor will allegedly reveal that the transplant was a success because the donor was not a miraculous stranger, but a direct first-degree relative. It seems like the exact words will echo through the silent waiting room like a gunshot. The DNA test confirms that Isaiah is the biological father of the baby. High chances are the silence that follows will be the most deafening, uncomfortable moment in the show's history. What if Curtis physically collapses from the sheer weight of the betrayal? The truth might be way more complicated than just anger. It will be a complete and total destruction of a man's soul and identity. The behind-the-scenes whispers say that Curtis will look at Portia, the woman he just married and built a life with, and realize that every single smile, every single tear of joy over this pregnancy was built on a sickening, unforgivable lie. The hush-hush rumor details that the fallout will be absolutely apocalyptic for Portia. It seems like Trina will be the first one to break the heavy silence, staring at her mother with a look of pure, unadulterated disgust that cuts deeper than a knife. High chances are Trina will scream at Portia, asking how she could possibly do this to their family again after the years of agonizing lies regarding her own paternity. What if Trina decides right then and there to pack her bags and cut Portia out of her life forever? The truth might be way more complicated, as Stella and Marshall will allegedly unleash a level of fury that we have never seen from them before. The unconfirmed leak suggests that Stella will have to be physically restrained from attacking Portia, screaming that she brought a toxic curse upon their family. The people who once championed Portia, who stood by her through every past mistake, will instantly turn their backs on her, leaving her completely isolated and sobbing in the middle of the crowded hospital. But the most brilliant and twisted part of this leaked script is the impossible moral dilemma it creates for the characters. It seems like the family will be burning with a rage so hot it could melt steel, but they will be completely paralyzed by the reality of what just happened in the operating. High chances are they will want to destroy Isaiah, to run him out of town and curse his name for sleeping with Portia and destroying Curtis's life. But what if they cannot even raise their voices at him without looking like monsters? The truth might be way more complicated, because Isaiah is lying in a recovery room down the hall, having just sacrificed his own body to save the child's life. The hush-hush rumor is that this paradox will drive Curtis absolutely insane. How do you punish the man who ruined your marriage, when that same man is the only reason the baby you love is still breathing? Isaiah will instantly become both the ultimate villain and the undeniable hero of the story, trapping everyone in a web of conflicting emotions. The behind-the-scenes whispers indicate that the aftermath of this revelation will dominate the show for the rest of the year. It seems like Curtis, once the initial shock wears off, will transform into a cold, ruthless man driven by vengeance. High chances are he will immediately contact his lawyers to demand the birth certificate be altered, violently stripping away his own legal rights just to erase Portia's lies from his official record. What if Curtis demands a full divorce and attempts to take everything Portia has built in this town? The truth might be way more complicated. As the unconfirmed leak suggests, Portia will be left with absolutely nothing, no husband, a daughter who despises her, and a completely ruined reputation. She will have saved her baby's life, but the cost will be the total annihilation of her own existence. The hospital corridors will become a brutal battleground of bitter stares and whispered insults every single time she walks into work, completely alone. As for Isaiah, the hush-hush rumor says he will be faced with the most monumental choice of his entire life once he wakes up from the procedure. It seems like he will have to decide whether to step up and claim the child he never knew he had, facing the relentless wrath of Curtis and the entire town, or walk away and leave Portia to raise the baby in the ashes of her destroyed life. High chances are Isaiah is not the kind of man to walk away from his own flesh and blood, setting up a brutal, years-long custody and emotional war that will tear the city apart. What if this is just the beginning of a much darker, more violent feud between the two men? The truth might be way more complicated, and I am telling you right now, do not trust anyone's smile in the upcoming episodes. If you think the worst is over once the baby is saved, you need to prepare yourself for a brutal heartbreak, because the real, emotional bloodbath hasn't even started yet.